Okay, so our first lab that we dealt with electricity is we were given a task to light this little light bulb, or lamp as there's oftentimes called, with just a wire and a battery. Okay, so as we found out, after a little bit of trial and error, all we need to do is make a closed conducting loop with the wire from the positive terminal to the negative terminal of the battery and back through the battery. Oops, come on. And that will light the light. There we go, a lit light. Alright. Okay, that's really no different than light bulbs and stuff in your house. Because if we look at our house, what do we have? We have something that supplies energy, which is the battery, or we call it voltage or potential difference. However, our lights aren't on 24 hours a day, so we hook them up to some sort of switch, like this. Alright, and then the bulb. Alright, and you can see how the switch functions. The switch, when it's what we call open, alright, it's off because there's no conducting path because this is broke. Okay, and then when we close the switch, the bulb is on because now there's a conducting path all the way from the high potential of the battery, or the plus terminal, all the way down to the low potential. So today what we're going to do is we're going to look at how we measure actual different parameters with electricity, voltage and current. And we're not going to be using light bulbs, but we're going to be using a different object called a resistor. Light bulbs are great because we can actually see the light go on. We can't necessarily see the light or see what's going on with a resistor, but they're much more accurate and they give us much better data for when we're actually taking measurements. If we try to take measurements with light bulbs, it doesn't work quite so well. As you can see, I've set up the circuit board. So this is the first step, is we're going to set up the circuit board with one battery, one switch, a piece of wire, and a resistor. Alright, now again, I throw the switch and boom, the circuit's on, but we can't really see anything that's happening. Sometimes with the resistors you might feel that they get a little bit warm, but there's not enough energy supplied by this battery to make this resistor all that hot. Now what's going on here is battery. Battery is what gives us our energy in our circuit, and as energy travels through the circuit, it has to get used somewhere, and it gets used up anywhere we have resistance. So that's what happens right here. When we had a light bulb, the light bulb acted as a resistor, and that used up your energy. So if you notice in our other lab that when the light bulb didn't light, the wire got hot. That's because the wire was using up the energy. We don't want the wire to use our energy. All right, that's bad. So now we're going to learn to take a voltage measurement. So this is our multimeter that we use to measure voltage and current and all kinds of things. It's called a multimeter because it measures multiple things. We can measure current, we can measure capacitance, we can measure AC voltage, we can measure DC voltage. All right, so there's a whole bunch of different things on here that we can measure. We're going to use current and DC voltage. All right, that's the voltage, which is the straight line. Now how we set it up is the black lead always goes into this port called common. The red one bounces back and forth depending on what we're measuring. When we're measuring voltage, it's over here, and you might not be able to see this in the video, but if you look at your meter, there'll be a V here, signifying that this port measures voltage. Alright, next we're going to flip it onto DC voltage, the one with the straight line, and you'll notice that this thing is bouncing all over the place, and the range is in millivolts. So that's a very, very, very small amount of voltage. This is really just a meaningless number. It's just kind of like trying to sample the air, and it's not really getting much, so it's fluctuating all over the place. The meter doesn't know what to do. Now, when does it know what to do? All right, as soon as we connect it to something with voltage. So we know that we have about 1.5 volts of potential difference from one end of the battery to the other. It's a 1.5 volt battery. All right, so we touch one end and touch the other, and there we go, 1.44 volts. Get that out of the way there. If you see that again, 1.44 volts. All right, so that's step one of your lab. All right, now I want you to just reverse the leads and see what you get. All right, second part, we want to measure the voltage at the resistor. So you're going to measure there. Boom, boom. Oops, something's not working. Oh, I don't have the switch on. Ta-da! All right. So we need to flip on the switch so we get voltage to the resistor. There we go. 1.4 something volts. And then the last thing you want to measure is measure from here to here to try to make a voltage measurement of your wire and see what you get on all those. So the next step, what we want to do is we want to measure the current. So the current, how do we measure current? So first of all, we have to set up our multimeter to measure current, which means we move this test lead over to here, and we change the dial all the way to current. These are the things that are most commonly missed. One, moving the test lead, or two, changing the multimeter. All right, so to measure current, we have to get the current to flow through the meter. So we'll discuss this more in detail a little later on when we learn about current. But to measure current, we always open something up in the circuit. That's actually why we put the switch in there. And then we just touch these two spots right there. And you should get a very small number, which I have here, 0.06. All right, so there's my current, 0.06 amps. Okay, for step two of this lab, you'll notice that I've modified the circuit slightly because what have I done? I've added another battery. So I put this battery in and this battery. I still have my switch and my resistor. So here's the measurements we want to take for this. So we're going to close our switch. We have to change the voltmeter back to voltage. So we move this over here and turn that on to voltage, DC voltage. We grab the test leads. We want to measure the voltage of the first battery. There to there. The voltage of the second battery. There to there. And then what we call voltage 1, 2, which is both batteries. So to do both batteries, we start at the beginning of that one and go to that one. All right, so voltage 1 is here to here. Voltage 2 is here to here. Voltage 1, 2 is from the beginning to the end. Then we'll measure our resistance voltage again. And we're going to measure current. So again, measuring current, we flip this over here. Boom. Turn that to current. Open the switch and measure current. Okay, lastly, we're going to add an additional resistor. So to do that, we're just going to take this out, put that in there, put that there. Actually, I'll move this over to here. Oops, no, that was good. And I have two resistors, so I have the red and the blue. So if we look at these measurements, what are we going to do? We're going to measure voltage again. Go back to voltage, DC voltage. We already measured the batteries from the step before, but now we want to measure the resistors. So it doesn't matter what order you do them. So let's measure from resistor 1 to the end of resistor 1, or the blue. Alright, whoops, got to put the switch on or it won't work. So there we go, I'm getting just under a volt. Now I do resistor 2, the red. And you get that number. And then I do that. Now if you notice, I have a negative sign in my numbers. Well, the negative sign is just because I have the leads backwards, so it thinks the energy is traveling one way around, but it's actually traveling the opposite way. So we'll just flip those around, and you notice, voila, we go back to positive. And then lastly, let's measure our current. Flip all the way over to current. There. Open my switch. And there's my current. Okay. Alright, so this is a little introduction on how to measure our circuits, measure voltage and current. So go through, finish up the rest of the lab questions, and we'll be doing plenty more of this in the weeks to come.